Number one, they play so many functions. Number one, because they are not digestible, they slow down digestion. So that means because they slow down digestion, food is going to take a longer period of time while going through your alimentary canal or your GIT system. Now, when they slow down this digestion, it means it gives time for the food to stay long in the GIT system. So it gives time for all the nutrients to be extracted out in the different parts where extraction or absorption of these nutrients take place. It's like when water is flowing through a pipe and then you slow it down. And then maybe at certain places of that water, there is removal of certain nutrients. So that's what the fibers do. They slow down your digestion such that there is proper absorption of minerals at different levels of the system. So when you eat a meal without fibers, your process is very fast. Your process is very fast, and so the minerals are not properly taken out of the food that you've eaten. These are the cases where people will come and tell you, I eat a lot, but I don't gain weight. Or when I go for medical checkup, they tell me I lack some food. Because the fibers are carbohydrates, but maybe you're eating vitamins, you're eating proteins, you're eating what? But because this digestion is very fast, all these are not absorbed. So you're suffering from diseases that are due to deficiency of some minerals or some proteins or some other food and nutrients, because all the food that you eat quickly go through the system without proper absorption of different foods at different parts of our digestive system. So the fibers slow down. Number two, the fibers are also important because they fill up your gut, and you have that feeling of satisfaction. You feel okuse. You feel your GIT is filled up. So it stops you from consuming more food, hence stopping you from actually adding more sugars or more calories to your body that may end up being converted into fat, like we discussed last week when we were looking at calories, or like we are going to look at today what happens if you consume excess carbohydrates. Number three, eating plenty of fibers also, because they are not digestible by the body, also reduces the amount of excess glucose that your body is going to absorb if you eat the other types of carbohydrates. Because all the other type of carbohydrates, the starches and then the simple carbohydrates, the end result is glucose into your body. But we are going to look at the dangers of having excess glucose into our body, because any excess is converted into fat. Lastly, the fibers also, the scientists, the nutritionists are now telling us that they reduce your risks of to colon and rectal cancers. We've understood fibers and their digestion and how they function. Now let us look at the other types of carbohydrates. Number one, their digestion starts in the mouth. So when you eat the other sources of carbohydrates, if they are simple carbohydrates like the monosaccharides and the disaccharides, their digestion immediately takes place in the mouth. If they are polysaccharides or the starches, after cooking it, the heat breaks down those strong bonds that are holding the sugars together. So when you eat it, it is broken down by chewing, and then in different parts of your digestive system, there is absorption. Now, what is absorbed are simple sugars, because we've understood that the cooking and the chewing further breaks down this starchy thing into simple sugars, either glucose or fructose. Basically, we are going to look at glucose. So your digestive system picks out the glucose, it enters your blood streams, to become what we call now blood sugar or blood glucose. And then this blood sugar or blood glucose now is going to go everywhere that your blood is going, to supply the different body parts or the different body organs or the different organ cells with glucose. And then at that level, of course, the moving of the glucose from the bloodstream into the cells is aided by a protein called insulin. And so now it leaves the blood streams to enter the cell. At the cell level is where we have the different cells in the part called mitochondria manufacturing of energy that cell uses to carry out its function. So what happens when all the cells in the different body parts take out the glucose they need? Now, before we go to that, your brain uses most of the glucose that you have, because the brain carries out numerous functions when we are awake and when we are asleep. Everything that your body does, the brain is contributing. So what happens when all the muscles, the brain, the lungs, the heart, and all the other parts take out the glucose that they need? There is always a remainder of glucose that remains in your blood. Like all the parts have taken off what they need. Now there is always a remainder. So what happens with the remainder? First of all, when the systems realize that we don't need any more oxygen, but there is still some remaining in your blood, it sends it to the liver. It tells the liver that your liver, keep us this remaining glucose. So the liver keeps the remainder of the glucose in the form of glycogen. So it keeps it in the liver. But if the liver keeps the remainder, but still you're still eating, you're still supplying the body with more glucose, or you go for another meal while the liver is still struggling to keep the glucose from the last meal you had. For example, you ate your breakfast and you gave the body too much glucose that it took off what it took off what it wanted, and then it kept the remainder in the liver in form of glycogen. But then it's lunchtime, you're still supplying the body with more glucose. What the body does, it now converts this excess glucose in your blood into fats. Now these fats are stored in different parts of your body. And dangerous, sometimes it's also stored inside your blood vessels. How much carbohydrates do you need as a man in a day? Last week we looked at a topic called kilocalories, and we said for you to properly run your body on average with minimal activity, you need about 2,000 kilocalories. And we say that every food that you eat, or any food that you eat, is going to give your body a certain amount of kilocalories. A half of this, that is a range of 900 to 1,000, 3,000, should come from carbohydrates. This means that the rest of the calories should come from other sources: the proteins, the vitamins, the minerals, such that you have a balanced diet. So this also means that we should control the amount of carbohydrates that we consume, because if you don't control the amounts of carbohydrates that you consume, you're going to find that all the 2,000 kilocalories in a day that your body needs are coming from one source, that is carbohydrate. That also means that in a day, a man should not consume carbohydrates that are more than 225 to 325 grams in a day. That means you should not consume more than a quarter of carbohydrates, of these digestible carbohydrates in a day. If you're eating posho in a day, it means that in a day you should not consume more than a quarter of posho. If you combine the posho you had at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, for those that are still having dinner, it should not be more than a quarter. If you're eating rice, if you're eating sweet potato, if you gauge or you average weigh that food, you should not have more than a quarter. If you have more than a quarter, it means you're supplying your body with more than it requires for a day. And like I've explained, any excess of this is going to be turned into fats after the body takes off what it requires. And that's where we have issues of people that want to lose weight. You're working out a lot, you're doing a lot of things, but the amount of sugars that you're putting to your body or the amount of carbohydrates that you're consuming in a day does not allow you to lose weight, because you go out and burn out 130 calories, but then you consume more than a quarter of carbohydrates in a day. So you're giving your body more than you're burning. I've seen this with men. They go out to play that night football, after they go and eat a lot of pork with cassava and what. So you burn out 200 kilocalories, you eat 500 kilocalories. At the end of that day, you're not losing weight, but rather you're adding weight. And sometimes you become discouraged. You say, okay, I go to gym, I'm playing soccer, I'm walking, but I'm not losing weight. The simple answer is you're burning out less and consuming more. So we need to understand the two, that any excess that you're taking is going to be converted into fat. So if you're on a weight loss program, you need to also regulate what you eat. You need to regulate the sugars or the starch or the simple carbohydrates that you're eating. Normally, actually, people that have come to me for weight loss program, I normally do what we call ketosis. We totally reduce the carbohydrate, or we limit it to less than 100 grams in a day, and we increase the other foods. We increase the fibers in your food, those are fruits and vegetables. We increase the proteins in your food, we include the vitamins in your food, and then before you know it, naturally the body works out its physiology and you lose weight naturally. And that's the best way actually of losing weight, when you do it using foods, because that is sustainable. Then when I tell you you need to go and run, you need to go to gym, because that is not sustainable. Sometimes you don't have the time. Sometimes it makes your muscles sore, it gives pain, and then you're not comfortable anymore. So the natural way is when we regulate the amount of carbohydrates we use versus what we burn out. You need to regulate, or you need to balance the type of carbohydrates that you consume. I've said that it is more important if you eat more fibers in your meals than actually starches. They come from in Uganda, people normally measure in a quarter, half kilo, those units. So don't eat more than a quarter of carbohydrates in a day, unless your activity is so high, or unless your nature of work requires a high energy supply. For example, the athletes that are ever running, their muscles need a lot of supply of this. So for them, they can eat way above that, depending on how their nutritionists or how their diet advisors advise them. So if you are very active, you are an athlete, you are someone who does vigorous work on a daily, you need a high supply. So you could eat more than a quarter, because your body needs more supply of these sugars. But for someone who does not do heavy work, you work in office like me, or your work rate is not as busy as that of athletes, you may need to regulate the amount and the type of carbohydrate you consume. Definitely, the recommendation is that you consume more fibers than starch. Number two, you need to combine the carbohydrate with the other foods. You need to have a balanced diet. Now, what some people do, you have your whole plate of food with only rice. There are no greens, there are no proteins, you're not taking enough water. So what happens, you're supplying your body with a lot of carbohydrates. But remember, like I said, at a level where at the cell level where this glucose is leaving the blood streams to enter your cells, there is a protein called insulin. So now, if you don't eat enough protein, or that hormone called insulin, if you don't eat enough protein and your body does not manufacture this in needed amounts, you may not have that interchange take place. So this is a condition where you eat a lot of carbohydrates, but then you're not in a good shape. you're still feeling weak. It is simply because you're not supplying the body with other foods that are needed in the digestion of the carbohydrates that you're eating. The other foods sometimes help in the regulation of the amounts or in absorption of these sugars from the blood cells, or to actually convert the fats back into glucose if your body needs this. It is done by other foods other than carbohydrates. So you need to have a proper balanced diet, so you don't consume carbohydrates alone. Number 3, let us replace highly processed grains with whole grains. For example, tolia muchere mu processing, and sometimes it's good to eat that rice that is not highly processed. Sometimes it is good to eat wheat that is not highly processed, because when it is processed, when it is highly processed, each time it is processed, the fibers are taken off, the fibers are wiped off. But we've looked at the great importance of the fibers in our digestion. So sometimes it is important to shift from products that are having highly processed starches or polysaccharides to the ones that are having whole grain. For example, these days there is bread that is made up of whole grain. That is more nutritious than bread that is made up of highly processed carbohydrates. Number 4, stick to low-fat dietary products. Yes, we've understood that dairy products like milk, cheese, and other products can be a good source of carbohydrates, but we also need to understand that these come with a lot of unwanted fat. So it would be recommended that you don't use dairy products as a main source for your carbohydrates, because apart from giving you the needed carbohydrates, they're also going to give you a lot of unwanted fat, and sometimes this increases our level of cholesterol and other side effects of unwanted excess fat. Number 5, we also recommend that you use legumes. These are beans, these are peas, these are lettuce, as part of your carbohydrate source. So instead of eating too much portion, too much rice as a source of carbohydrate, we recommend that you can also use beans. So you cook your beans very well and use it as a source of carbohydrates. Why? Because apart from giving you the carbohydrate that you need, these are also going to supply you with other nutrients. For example, the beans are good sources of vitamins. They are sometimes good sources of minerals, but also good sources of fiber. So, because some people will ask you, okay, now you're telling us not to eat portion, not to eat our rice, not to eat our highly processed grains, and what should we eat? Legumes are also a good source of that. So when you're eating food, make sure beans are there, peanuts are there, peas are there, because these are going to give you other nutrients apart from carbohydrates. So we recommend that if there is a food that is going to give you more than one type of nutrient, for example, when you eat mangoes, you're going to get the vitamins, but also those other fibers in are going to be a great source of fiber. So you're going to get more than one food nutrient by eating one fruit. The other caution that we need to take while consuming carbohydrates is you limit foods with added sugars. For example, cake, ice cream, sodas, any other beverage that is sweetened. Why? Because these highly added sugars are going to increase your calories, the amount of calories in your body, but they are not giving you any other nutrient. For example, when you take a soda, the only thing you're having is calories. It is not giving you any vitamin, it's not giving you any other important nutrient. At the end of that day, if your limit of kilocalories in a day is 2,000 kilocalories, and you take, for example, a small bottle, and maybe that small bottle is going to give you maybe 500. So you take 4 bottles of soda, you already accumulated the needed calories in a day. But your body has hit its limit of calories, but it has not got any other nutrient. It has not got any minerals, it has not got any fibers, and it has not got any vitamins. So you're posing a health challenge for your body, and that's why some of you end up getting unnecessary weight, because you're consuming more added sugar or more sweeteners that are simply raising your calorie levels but not supplying your body with any other nutrients. So number 7, choose a type. When you're choosing carbohydrates, consider your age, consider your activity as a person, and also consider your required weight. I discussed BMI, and I discussed how we calculate our BMI, body mass index. So each of us, depending on your height, there is a required weight. When you go above that weight, is what we call being obesity. When you go below that, is what we call underweight. So consider your required weight that you're supposed to have depending on your weight, and then choose the type of carbohydrate that you're going to consume. If you're old, you're very old and you're less active, you need to consume carbohydrates that have less glucose in them. Those are fibers. That means more than 3/4 of your plate should have fibers, and only the less than the other a quarter of your plate should have starchy food that contain a high deal of glucose. If you're very active, then you could have half plate high concentration of glucose and the other half fibers. So you need to balance. But at the end of that day, we say the total amount of calories that you have in your body, only half of that should be from starchy carbohydrates, and the rest should be from other food types. Remember to consult your nutrition expert at least once a year to make sure that you're eating, that your body is getting the amount of nutrients it's supposed to get. Again, carbohydrates are a very essential part of our nutrition as men for us to be able to perform well in our beds, at our homes, and in our offices. But if we overconsume them, they can be dangerous, because we are going to have excess accumulation of blood sugars, leading to diabetes, the type of diabetes that is related to sugars. We may become obese, that is unhealthy accumulation of excess fats, because the body is trying to get rid of the excess sugar in your blood. So all that tells us one thing: we need to be open-minded by the type and the amount of carbohydrates we consume every day. I thank you for listening and watching up to this point and understanding carbohydrates. Next week we shall be looking at another important food called proteins. Thank you so much. Remember to share, remember to like, and remember to make this video move as fast as possible by sharing it to all men in your life. May God bless you and have a beautiful Friday.